This is Night Watch. Reporting from New York,
Travis Marshall. Tonight, more on the news that has rocked Manhattan, if not the world.
We do have some very sad news to discuss first. Nichelle Nichols, an icon in television and the voice of Diane Maza in Gargoyles, has passed away. And when I say icon, I'm not saying this lightly. She was Lieutenant Uhura on the original Star Trek. Martin Luther King Jr. himself asked her to stay on the show when she was thinking of leaving because she thought what she was doing was very important. And she broke barriers, such as the first interracial kiss on television, which was sadly blacked out in some parts of the country.
Yeah, that's hard to believe. I remember when that episode aired. I was in college, and I mean, I thought it was a big deal, but not as big as it turned out to be, obviously. But
I don't think it was one of the first. I don't think it was literally the first interracial kiss. And are you sure it actually? I know they were afraid it would be blacked out, but are you sure it was blacked out in some places?
I had heard many times that it was.
Yeah, that feels like I could be wrong. But my reading seems to suggest that there was a lot of fear that it would be and that it wasn't actually. But not that everyone was happy about it, but I'm not sure. In other words, the facts are great enough. I don't know that we need to embellish them too much. But Nichelle was amazing. I mean, she was, I think you're right, she was absolutely iconic, but it's easy to forget that she was also an incredibly talented actress. And then beyond that, also just the sweetest, nicest human being you'd ever want to meet. She once had Vic Cook and I over to her house for lunch or maybe tea. I'm trying to remember now, but she was just a wonderful, lovely human being on top of being just an incredibly talented actor, singer, dancer. She was just great. And as Diane, obviously Uhura, that goes without saying, but as Diane Maza, I just feel we got so lucky to have her on the show.
You're here.
I remember first watch through how pleased I was that she was, because, I was a Star Trek fan as well. So we had all these Star Trek actors already, and then to hear her voice was just a thrill. And she did an amazing job.
Yeah, for us as well. And then, she was so good that we just kept giving her more to do. I mean, we'll talk about it down the road, but, Mark of the Panther, which is an episode that from this season that we'll get to eventually, she has this whole story that she tells, and it's just so lovely to listen to her.
She was also a guest at the 2003 gathering of the Gargoyles Convention. We didn't originally plan or ever think that we could get her, but we found out she was attending another convention that was in town, and we invited her over to come join us for our banquet Q&A, and she was a very gracious guest, very lovely. And as I recall, though, I did not sit at her table. I sat at your table, Greg, and I remember saying at the time, I kind of feel bad for the people who are sitting with her right now. She's so classy and such an icon. They probably have to watch every little move they make to make sure their manners are impeccable, whereas Greg is probably just as big a slob as the rest of us.
Don't give a damn what it do with me.
Actually, Greg, as I recall, what you said was, I'm probably an even bigger slob than you guys.
That makes sense, yeah.
Yeah, that sounds in character.
But she will definitely be missed, and I hope her legacy continues for many, many years to come.
I can't imagine it wouldn't. Amazing human.
I'm afraid we're out of time. This has been Night Watch. Sleep well.
Who made you? Victor, bravo. It's a wise monster that knows its own father. Not only made you, he made a mess of you. Who are you? Who are you? My name is Legion, for we are many. I would guess there are 4 of you at least. Or could there be 5?
The story is told, though who can say if it be true, of a clan of medieval warriors awoken in modern-day Manhattan, of the animated series that told their story.
It is an age of darkness. Superstition and the sword rule. It is an age of fear. It is the age of gargoyles.
Welcome to Voices from the Eyrie, a Gargoyles podcast.
Hello and welcome to Voices from the Eyrie, a Gargoyles podcast. I'm Zach Joyner, the owner of the website that powers the program, Spidey-Dude.com, and I am the executive producer of the network that powers the program, the Spidey Dude Radio Network. Before we get started, though, I wanted to thank our patrons at patreon.com/SpideyDude Network, Greg, Jurgen, Vinkman, Scott, Kaylee, and Phoenician. Thank you for your support. And if you want to get this show earlier, check it out there, as well as other fine perks that you'll get whenever you become a Patreon subscriber. There will be some exclusive content that's only for Patreon subscribers coming to you very soon. But before I turn it over to our hosts, I want to encourage you to check out our other fine programs, such as Spidey Dude Experience, ASM Classics, Make Mine Mayday, Bogan Rider Variety Hour, the Salby Sima Era Podcast, Clone Saga Chronicles, and A Spectacular Radio, a Spectacular Spider-Man related show that starred a few familiar names to the program. Please follow the network on Twitter at Spidey Dude Radio and this show at From Eyrie, and feel free to send them feedback at gargoylesvoices@gmail.com. Leave us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast catcher, such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, iHeartRadio Podcasts, Amazon Audible, as well as Google Podcasts. It helps us raise our visibility. And like, share, and subscribe for more at Spidey Dude Network, youtube.com/Spidey Dude Network. Also, follow us on Facebook and Twitter, as I mentioned the Twitter threads, but also follow us on Facebook, facebook.com/Spidey Dude Network, as well as Instagram, if you like Instagram, instagram.com/Spidey Dude Network. With that out of the way, it's absolutely my pleasure to introduce the hosts of our show, Jennifer L. Anderson and Greg Bashansky.
Welcome back, Gargoyles fans. I'm your co-host, Greg Bashansky, and welcome to another episode of Voices from the Eyrie, a Gargoyles podcast. And joining us is my co-host, Jennifer L. Anderson.
Hello, everyone.
What was that?
That was excitement from one of our guests, I think.
It's a crazy notice from one of your fans.
And
fans, what are those?
And also joining us, as usual, is the co-creator, supervising producer, Mr. Greg Wiseman.
Hi.
And we are very happy to welcome back to the show the voice director of Gargoyles, Jamie Thomason.
Hello.
Hey, Jamie. It's been a little while since we've spoken with you. How are you up? How have you been? How are you holding up?
I'm doing all right. I'm excited to be hearing Voices from Lake Erie. Or wait, what's it? Did I get that wrong?
So close. You're so close.
Something like that. No, this is awesome. And I'm very sorry about last month.
We weren't going to mention that.
I got stuck in this session. What can I tell you?
It happens.
Not today, boy. I cleared the decks at the record show. I was here 5 minutes early, ready to go.
I was the late one today.
Yeah, but you're here every time, so you earn it. It's all right.
Yeah, they're probably bored of me right now.
No, you heard the cheer from your legion of fans.
All right, and I'm glad you're both here.
Boring, I think, is one of them.
Because we're going to discuss shortly an episode that is so 90s that I have chosen to wear a Nirvana T-shirt for this recording.
You do smell like Teen Spirit. That's awesome.
I'm wearing a Gargoyles T-shirt in honor of this recording. An original 1994 Gargoyles T-shirt.
Very nice.
Vintage. Nice.
In 20 years.
Shut up.
All right, before we actually get to the episode...
No truth telling.
All right, before we actually get to the episode itself, let's discuss the continuing transition into the second season. Jamie, if you remember, is casting and recording for 52 episodes instead of 13? Was there a different approach you took to it at all?
Yeah, get it done. It's actually awesome having that kind of, volume. The more time you spend together, the more, characters develop, the more you discover. It was great. Season 2. I mean, Season 1 was absolutely awesome. Season 2 was fantastic. Really cool. We more than found our stride and got to do so much. Great cast, too. Several of which in this episode.
Yeah. Speaking of, we had hoped to talk to you last week. I guess I am bringing that up. Anyway, obviously things didn't work out. But to follow up from last week, especially since he was such a big star, let's talk about casting Tim Curry as Dr. Severius.
Sure. You want to ask me a question?
Now, how did that go about? What was it like having him in the booth? The man's a legend.
Tim Curry is awesome, always awesome in the booth. We were friends by that point. He is an amazing talent and an amazing man, and he sure was then. I think my guess is the casting when, Greg has a photographic memory, so he can tell us exactly. But
or
my
he
guess is, yes, he has copious notes. Put it this way: no one's going to accuse me of, reinventing the wheel by having Tim Curry as, he's the bad guy? He's the evil mad scientist guy? How out of the box? But
who would have thought?
Tim's fantastic. But yeah, it's a whole new direction. Wait, Alan Rickman is going to be your villain in that movie? Shocking. So Tim, what's neat to, and a little twist on Dr. Severius is Tim's unique spin on the accent. But it's just everything Tim says is just interesting. He just has a way of wrapping his mouth around words and spitting out speeches. It's just, he's a joy to listen to. He's an absolute joy to direct. He's just fantastic in everything he does. So as I was starting to say, my guess is the casting discussion was something like, hey, we've got a evil mad scientist guy coming up. And, probably said something really intelligent like, how about Tim Curry? To have Tim do that. We didn't, put it this way, didn't do nearly as many auditions as we did looking for Goliath, for example. It was a more succinct casting process. We didn't do any auditions, for the record. So there's no real casting story there. But I'm happy to talk about it.
You just got to pick and choose the best and ask them to come in?
Yeah. But that's actually another
really
thing
kind of did.
Season 2. Yeah. Even throughout the, we'll say, extensive auditioning process prior to Season 1, lots and lots and lots of actors came in to read for all the characters, and lots of agents were involved. And even just in that audition process, the word was already starting to spread, like, wow, this is really well written. Have you guys heard about this new Gargoyles thing? And then agents are getting calls saying, hey, how come you haven't brought me in for that Gargoyles thing? I hear it's really... And so then once, we get into production, then the word's really spreading. And by the time we got to season 2, the word was out, well out. This was a special show. It was an extraordinarily well-written, really intelligent, really fun show. It's just a great show for an actor. So we didn't have to beg a lot of people. That said, it was really all me and my casting, prep.
Oh, yes. They were like, Jamie Thomason? I've been dying to work with Jamie Thomason. And they lined up, right?
Yeah. So it was great. It wasn't a hard sell, because even for those who hadn't heard of the show, if the actor hadn't heard of the show, the agent certainly did. So, we'd call and say, hey, how about, CCH Pounder? And whether or not she had ever heard of the show, her agent, or sure, it's the same agent as Tim Curry, by the way, certainly did. And so it was an easy sell for the agent, in talking to their clients. And we, as a result, got some amazing cast. The number of, Royal Shakespeare Company stars that parade through this series is fairly astounding. What was the episode, Greg, where
definitely top notch?
We had like three or four of it's like David Warner, who was the definitive Hamlet in the 70s for the Royal Shakespeare Company, and then Roger Rees was the definitive Hamlet in the 80s, and then there were three Hamlets. What was the other?
Yeah, I can't remember, but it was. I mean, we just. This episode that we're about to discuss is a perfect example. I mean, Jamie brings up Cece, and the way casting worked after auditioning all our season 1 regulars, and with the exception of character of Angela, which I'm sure we'll talk about later in the season, where we again held auditions because she was a new lead / regular. Everything else was for the most casting. So
yeah, we auditioned so many hundreds.
So generally, what would happen is we'd be at the recording session because Jamie, you were working on like 20 shows back then, not just Gargoyles.
A couple.
Yeah, and I was busy producing the show with Frank. So the only time we really had to get together tended to be after recording for the previous episode or something like that. So we'd wind up, being at a recording session and going, well, what do we need for the next episode, which we're recording in a week or 2 weeks or something like that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, well, this is the episode that's coming down the pike. You haven't seen it yet, but it's going to have, we already cast Michael Dorn as Goliath's brother, and now we need Goliath's sister. So we need someone who can go toe-to-toe with both Keith and Michael. And that's not an easy...
Yeah, it's a short list.
Yeah. So then, Cece comes up. And again, a lot of our casting sessions, it's not like I specifically remember this or anything, because I don't. But my guess, it's like I was saying for Tim. It's like, I don't remember who brought Tim up first, probably Jamie. But every once in a while, it'd be like, oh, we need something like this. And someone would say, well, what about Tim Curry? Or what about CCH Pounder? And like, yeah. And then we'd get them.
Yeah.
That was the thing. I mean, that was the sort of stunning thing, which goes all the way back to casting Ed Asner, which is like, well, what do you want for Hudson? Well, my ideal world, I want Ed Asner. I know we'll never get him, but something like that, someone like that. And then, of course, we actually didn't get Ed. Not just
didn't just get him. He came in red.
Yeah,
for a character whose spec says, Hudson hates spunk. in the character spec, and he came in and read.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, do it in Scottish before you leave. I said, oh, by the way, Ed, do it in Scottish now before you leave.
Right, yeah. So I know we've told that story already, but it's still, even to this day,
Dance for us.
25 plus years later, it still blows me away. You know, I mean,
yeah.
And so that would be the thing. We'd be like, well, who do you want for this? And we'd be like, oh, well, what about David Warner to play the Archmage? Oh, yeah, that'd be good. And then we'd get him. I mean, Jamie would get him, but tell me if I'm wrong, but I don't feel like it was like one of these things where you're begging the agent to try, you know, it just was, hey, you got this gig. Get Gargoyles. Yeah. David wanted, and they'd be like, oh, it's Gargoyles? Yeah, sure.
Yeah, they've already heard of it. Or like I said, at least the agent knew about it. And even if somehow we thought of somebody who the agent didn't know anything about it, and the agent was in London or so, I don't know, we still, just got to say, okay, here's the script. Go ahead, give us a look. And so even if they'd never heard of it, they'd read the script and say, dang, tough. It's the kind of thing. Yeah. Ed was one of the first people to talk about it. Ed talking about it, and John Rhys Davies as the Scottish King character. I don't know if we're allowed to say that name. But talking about how... there you go. Way to go. What was that?
Is that the door? Oh, don't worry. It's just the actors. My Uncle Baldrick was in a play once. Really? Yeah, it was called Macbeth. And what did he play? Second codpiece. Macbeth wore him in the fight scene. So he was a stunt codpiece. Did he have a large part? Depends who was playing Macbeth. Coincidentally, Baldrick, actors are very superstitious. On no account mention the word Macbeth this evening, all right? Why not? It brings them bad luck, and it makes them very unhappy. Oh, so you won't be mentioning it either? No. Well, not very often. You should have knocked. Oh, knocked, you impertinent butler. We're loud enough to wake the hounds of hell.
Lead on, Macduff. I shall. Lest you continue in your quotation and mention the name of the Scottish play.
Oh, never fear, I shan't do that. By the Scottish play, I assume you mean Macbeth.
Say to office calls, but we may come in.
What was that?
We were exorcising evil spirits. Being but a mere butler, you will not know the great theatre tradition that one does never speak the name of the Scottish play.
What, Macbeth?
Potato off the sauce, but we may come in.
Oh, you mean you have to do that every time I say Macbeth?
Will you please stop saying that? Always call it the Scottish play.
So you want me to say the Scottish play?
Yes!
Rather than Macbeth?
Take off the sauce, but we may come in.
Say, what is all this hullabaloo, all this shouting and screaming and yelling blue murder? Why, it's like that play we saw the other day. What was it called?
Macbeth?
Take off the sauce, but we may come in.
No. It was called Julius Caesar.
Oh, yes, of course. Julius Caesar. Not Macbeth.
Anyway, the point is, the word was out. I remember Ed and John Rhys Davies talking about it, that it's the kind of, it's the kind of rich material that, as a working actor in Hollywood, you didn't get the opportunity to do a lot. If you want to go do some stage, in not the Mark Taper form, you might get some good material. But if you're here in Hollywood, there just wasn't a lot of stuff at this level of sophistication also. People were happy and excited to do it.
Awesome.
But mainly it was because of me and my cloud.
This level of sophistication, that's a great quote, because it's like, yeah, like this episode with cyborg zombie gargoyle. You don't get that level of sophistication just anywhere.
It's one of those comments that you can say about anything. Like, you go see someone in a Broadway show and it's terrible, and you go backstage and say, that was really something. Oh, you've done it again. It's universally applicable. At this level of sophistication, you just didn't get a lot of stuff like that. But CCH Pounder, my point was, I've been a fan of hers since Baghdad Cafe, and had been looking for something for her. And as Greg mentioned, I was doing probably 8 different series and 14 different movies in different stages of production at any given time. So there was a lot of production going on. So, David Warner, for example, brought in to do another movie. He was a narrator in Winnie the Pooh. So when Archmage came up here, it was easy to say, hey. And again, it was just the easiest sell. People were dying to do it. I mean, there were people that would come in and say, finally, you finally bring me in.
Nice.
Particularly people associated with the Star Trek franchise.
Xander Berkeley is also in this episode, and I find him to be a very underrated voice actor because he's very good. I loved him as Iago here, and I know he only gets one other episode later, and he only has one line, and then I loved him as Mysterio on Spectacular Spider-Man. The guy, there's just something...
You're welcome.
He was just so smooth and deliciously evil in this episode in particular.
Yeah, Xander is just an excellent actor, period. And he tended to get cast a lot as some kind of intelligent, either an evil, bad guy, or at least like in The Right Stuff, he's the press rep that everybody hates because they all care about the real stuff and nobody cares about the press clippings. With Xander, it was his manager, agent, I can't remember, who she'd been pitching him for a while for a variety of different projects we were working on. And so when Iago came out, again, it's easy to say, hey, who's getting pitched a lot? And did he read for us way back in the beginning, Greg? I don't even remember.
I don't
Would he have read
recall that. I mean, he might have. I mean, we saw so many people, but I don't recall that, so I tend to think the answer is no, but I could be just forgetting because,
Yeah, I don't...
I'm ancient.
I'm sure I don't know what you mean. But just because of anything, Xander might be an actor that I would, typically need to... He wasn't the star of a show at the time, Very successful working actor and a fantastic actor. But if anything, he might be an actor that I would have to sell. Hey, how about Xander Berkeley for this? He's that guy from that movie. But I don't remember there being any arm twisting. So, Greg, did you already know him from something, or did I show you a clip? Or
I can't remember. I mean, I have to think that I knew Xander from something, but now the order of what I've seen and
right.
who I would work with it's all mushed up in my head. But
yeah, I remember that thing that happened last month. Oh wait, no, that was in 1995. It's all kind of a bullet.
Right, yeah.
He was the foster father in Terminator 2.
Duh.
Yeah. I mean, again,
like the iconic role.
I don't.
Yes, the iconic role.
Yeah, I don't feel like there were ever any big arguments. Like someone said, use this.
Yeah.
Someone said, what if we use this guy and then
actors.
Right, and then it was like, no. It was fairly smooth sailing. I mean, I know there were a couple roles where, without going into specifics, where having gotten so many people from Next Generation,
Star Trek franchise, for example,
that we kind of wanted to get Patrick Stewart, and my memory is that, and this is not on Patrick, but his agent was asking for this, paycheck that
a special
was way above
situation.
Way above what we were paying everyone else. And the problem with that was twofold. One, it's not necessarily fair to the people who come in week in and week out. But two, literally, we had, as I recall, and Jamie, feel free to correct me, but I think we had a favored nation thing going on, which meant that
it's
anything whatever the top rate we paid somebody, everyone would jump up to that top rate. So it would blow out our budget, not just for the one person, but...
Yeah, it was a scale show. Everybody got paid scale. That was it. There wasn't a discussion about...
Scale plus 10.
And 10% for the agent. That's correct. But there wasn't the buyout was actually awesome back then. But there wasn't a discussion about rate. It was like, here's what it is, and the only discussion is, do they want to do it? I've had the pleasure of working with Patrick multiple times on several different movies, and he's fantastic. But my guess is that I'm not going to quote an agent, but I wouldn't be surprised if somebody said something along the lines of he doesn't wake up for less than $100,000 or something like that. He got paid very, very well to do voiceover, and God bless him, well deserved, good for him. But he was one of the very few Star Trek franchise folks that we were not able to get in.
And I remember having some discussion of going, oh, well, why don't we just ask, Jonathan and Marina let's do an end run around this agent. And then we made the conscious decision that was just sort of unfair, to ask that of Jonathan or Marina or both. And again, it wasn't like we weren't getting good people. So it wasn't like, oh, we're desperate here. It felt more like, well, yeah, that would have been cool, but we're good and we're getting good people. And again, for the most part, John and Marina were talking up the show over at the Paramount lot and saying to people like Michael Dorn and Brent Spiner and LeVar Burton, et cetera, well, it's a good gig. The scripts are good. And hey, no makeup,
and Michael Dorn
Star Trek was a big issue for a lot of those actors.
No 4 hours of makeup.
And so instead, only Jamie had to wear makeup for our recordings.
I am right now.
Well, was he doing it all the way back then?
Hours in hair in with the hairdresser too. You don't become the White Al Sharpton in just just by rolling out.
Exactly. This as I mentioned, gesturing to my face. This doesn't just happen. This takes work.
It's art. It's art.
All right. Okay, moving on. Okay, time to wrangle this thing.
I love working with these guys, and I really miss them so much.
I love talking to them.
You guys,
someone has to do a little bit of directing here. Okay. No, it sounds fun. I would love to be in the booth one day with them. And anyway,
which one's Costello?
So the names Othello, Desdemona, and Iago. I mean, obviously I understand the Shakespearean reference. I think most of our listeners do. But why did you choose those names specifically? And I remember I was confused. I first learned about those names associated with them with the trading cards that were coming out because they needed names for those characters.
Well, the names Iago and Desdemona appear in the credits because we didn't know what else to call them. The main reason was, again, I'm a Shakespeare fanatic, and I think the writers and story editors, figured this out, and so they would pander to me sort of like, oh, let's do something Shakespearean, and Greg will let it through. Because I was supervising story editor in essence. That wasn't my title, but as producer, that's sort of what I was doing. Particularly in season 2 when we had 4 separate story editing teams. Someone had to sit at the top and make sure that it was all working together and not going off and becoming 4 separate television series. So as showrunner with Frank, that was kind of my job on the script side, just as Frank had 3 directing teams, and it was his job on the art side. But so my recollection is that Bob Skur and Marty Eisenberg, who wrote this episode for Michael Reeves, the story editor, turned in an outline that was reminiscent of the Othello, Desdemona, Iago situation, although making it more clearly a sort of with Goliath, in essence, in the Cassio role, if you're familiar with the play Othello.
Yeah.
But making it more explicit that Iago was into Desdemona, and that the reason he, it's famously sort of a mystery as to why, or subject to interpretation as to why in Shakespeare's play, Iago is doing all this horrible stuff to Desdemona and Cassio and Othello. But it's a little more explicit in Gargoyles that he's doing it because he's got a thing for Desdemona. And so that was all good. My note, as I recall, although again, it's been a long time and I haven't looked up my old notes or anything like that, but as I recall, my note were to make it, if we're going to sort of hint at it, let's just do it. And then from a scripting standpoint, you need names in a script. Humans need names, right? So we needed names in the script so that the board artist would know what character we were referring to. And the Othello character obviously is Coldstone, so you just refer to him as Coldstone. And the Cassio character is Goliath, so you just refer to him as Goliath. But Gargoyles have no name, so there wouldn't be a name for Desdemona or Iago. And that being the case, I'm like, okay. And this, I always had to explain this. I'm like, we're going to call her Desdemona, we're going to call him Iago, but not in dialogue. Don't ever use these names in dialogue. But in the script, and then I would get things backwards, like the gargoyle that we're labeling Desdemona. I'm like, you don't have to do that. Just call her Desdemona in the script. But don't use the name in dialogue because it's not her name. It's just what we're referring to her. It's like, I said, it's like if you had, parking lot attendant number 1 and parking lot attendant number 2. You wouldn't actually use those
378.
Yeah, you wouldn't actually use those names in dialogue. It's not like, hey, parking lot attendant number 2, how's the wife? You don't do that. But for some reason, this took tremendous amounts of my time. I don't mean specifically with Marty and Bob, because I don't even think I ever met with Marty and Bob. But it was always like this discussion to okay, how do we do that? I'm like, it's not hard. Just refer to them by those names in the script, but don't ever use the names in dialogue. Okay, because their names are a secret? No, they're not real. They're not really. Anyway, you get the idea.
Yeah. But, sometimes I run into fans who think she's called Desdemona because of some weird connection with Demona, and I found myself correcting them on that one, but...
Well, you say that, but the truth is that it's not like that was lost on me. Hey, the word Demona is in Desdemona. I mean, what it meant to me back in the day, as geeky as this sounds, is that we'd run into something like that and go, this is the right path to take. In other words, calling her Desdemona, even though that name is never used in dialogue, it is used in the credits because, again, you had to list CCH Pounder as playing somebody. So what are you going to say? Female gargoyle, who's the sister of Goliath,
the one
they
were fighting with.
So, and same with Iago. We use those two names in the credits for lack of anything better, but they were never actual names of the characters. But the thing was, when you say, like, okay, for our purposes, we're going to call her Desdemona, and the name Demona is inside Desdemona, it's like, okay, yeah, we are tapping into the Gargoyles universe. In the old, sense of the truth is out there, what I mean? And that's what a lot of what Gargoyles was just this sense that stories were out there, like Michelangelo looking at a block of marble and going, yes, I see the statue inside, and all I have to do is
show Mr. Weiss just compared himself to Michelangelo.
Yeah, well, I wasn't comparing to production of Michelangelo, thank you, but and what I was about to say is it's a lot of work to get to the statue inside, but every once in a while you just feel like, okay, this is right. This is the correct answer. When we get a little further down, the biggest example of this is Puck, when we get to that episode. But this felt like another one where it's like, oh yeah, this just feels right. Now, the flip side of that, in this episode, we reveal that Cold Stone was created not just from the stone remains of Goliath's brother, but from the stone remains of 3 different gargoyles. And that was always
meant to be that way, right?
It was always meant to be that way, but visually there's nothing about Cold Stone that looks like he's built out of
3 different, right?
3 different gargoyles. And the idea was he was always supposed to have 4 elements to his visual. From Othello, Iago, Desdemona, and then the cybernetics, which came from Xanatos. And so we bring that to life in this episode, which unfortunately has not horrible animation, but some of our more mediocre animation in this episode.
Some great facial expressions.
It has moments that are nice, but it's also got moments where you're like, but the problem, of course, was always with the original Cold Stone model that when we were doing it for season 1, we just ran out of time. We got a design and it was close enough, and I'm saying to Frank, this isn't what we need. We need this thing to look like more of a mishmash of all these different gargoyles. And there just wasn't time to send it back yet again, because we were having trouble getting that idea. That was, again, season 1, all the design work was being done in Japan by really talented people, but communication was far from instantaneous. We were literally communicating by fax machine. And some of your readers won't even know what listeners won't even know what a fax machine is. And then with the time difference, what it meant is that any back and forth communication took days. For us to communicate, if they sent us a design and we responded immediately, they wouldn't see it for a day. And then they couldn't respond to us for another day because our time zones were so at odds. And because the only means of communication was fax. And so they're just, they would, and plus things would have to get translated. So we'd send our notes, they'd translate our notes, they'd send us another version of it, but somehow or other what we were specifically asking for was lost in the translation. They didn't quite get it. And the truth is, what we really needed to have done for episode 13 of season 1 was to design Othello, Iago, and Desdemona, and then design Cold Stone. But there just wasn't time for that. To design 2 characters that don't even appear in the episode, when we weren't even sure we were getting a pickup to season 2, there was just no way we could justify asking them to design two characters that otherwise weren't going to exist. But if we were really doing it right, that's what we should have done. We should have designed those three characters, then taken pieces from each, and used them in the design of Cold Stone. But instead, we kind of tried to retrofit it. And I feel like the episode kind of pulls it off. At least, we're telling you this is the case. So it's not ideal. Because you'd rather be able to see it, or at least when you're told, you'd rather be able to look at the design of Cold Stone and go, oh, yeah, I see it. Instead, you're like, oh, really? That's a bit of a bummer to me.
Yeah, I've heard some confusion about Cold Stone's design. There are people who think he's metal and flesh and are a little bit surprised to hear that you meant for him to be metal and animated stone.
Yeah, and that also just never was clear enough color-wise or whatever, that it should have looked more like stone and metal. It should have looked like three different gargoyles, not one. The design for Cold Stone in a vacuum is extremely cool, but it's the one example, or at least the one example that really comes to mind for me in the series, where the design doesn't tell the story. At least not sufficiently to my mind.
Not as overtly as you might like, but I have to say, speaking from a plebeian's perspective, artistically, it does not get in the way of the storytelling to me. And as far as not understanding that he's made of stone, Simona literally has a line where she literally says, "You are made of stone." Right? You're
cold stone brought to life.
Brought to life, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, it's like I said, I think it all works well enough. The idea gets across, but you have to explain it. It's not clear from the design, and even when you do explain it, then the audience just has to go, okay, so I guess there's three gargoyles there. I don't see which pieces belong to the other two, but sure.
But again, we also tell them that you're made from, or is it Xanatos that says that?
Yeah, we tell it. I just wish that you saw it.
Well, I think I would say let the audience reach up instead of, pandering down to them. Let them they know what it is, they know what it is, and let them look at it and say, oh, interesting, yeah. I can see those subtleties in there.
I love how we're now in the position where Jamie is defending the show and I'm attacking.
It's like, hey, I can talk about my brother like that, but you can't. And I hear, I want to defend Greg. Like, hey, only I can talk. Say he made a mistake. And I just don't think it's a mistake.
And the truth is that, people bitch at me on Ask Greg or something like that about Cold Stone. My attitude is more like Jamie's, which is sort of like, all right, look, we gave you what we could. Sorry, and otherwise you get it. Quit pretending you don't get it. You get it.
That hair is a wig.
So,
You've said that once.
everything's context,
Out of curiosity, have you ever quantified, how many character designs did you do in season 1, for example? Because it's more than 13, I know.
Yeah.
A lot.
A little more than 13. I don't know. I mean, the number is... Certainly the number for the first 2 seasons is just immense. We put Goliath at the center of an ensemble cast, and then we just kept growing that ensemble cast.
And it's a fantastic ensemble cast of characters.
Yeah. And, villains, side characters, everyone ended up, at least to some extent, having a story. From Brendan and Margot to the jogger to, the two kids.
Brendan and Margot
have a story. Yeah. So, I mean, it just kept growing and growing and growing, and we just kept expanding the cast. And this is a great example. You have all our regulars, nearly all of them in here, and then on top of it, we throw in 2 gargoyles who, in theory, were there from day one, but you'd never actually seen them before.
I thought that they were blended in quite seamlessly. Like you made it work.
Mm-hmm. And they're great designs too.
That's right.
And they're great designs too.
The designs are great.
Yeah. For one thing,
I really do like the designs. I think Desdemona's design is particularly cool.
She was always a favorite of mine. I absolutely loved the wings that she had. It was so awesome.
Also great to finally have another female gargoyle on the show.
Yeah. And how about Michael Dorn playing Michael Dorn as Coldstone?
Oh my gosh!
Yes.
Michael Dorn as Othello inside Coldstone. Michael Dorn as a Xanatos programmed Coldstone. Michael Dorn doing CCH Pounder inside Coldstone. Michael Dorn doing Xander Berkeley as Iago inside Coldstone.
You knew exactly what personality was talking. He did such a great job.
You're welcome. And that's really in any particular speech he did that. It was like, the old Faye Dunaway in Chinatown. My sister, my daughter, in one speech, he's going back and forth. Hey, how you doing? I hate you. I'm not sure what to do. I'll kill you. Hey, let's get something. He was great.
That was the idea.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, my idea for Coldstone from day one was inspired, and I may have mentioned this before, but inspired by this TV movie version of Frankenstein that I'd seen as a kid with, I want to say with Michael Saracen. Not 100% sure that's right. But there's this great scene in it that really, just as a kid, blew me away, which was the idea, because you all know that Frankenstein gathered parts from all these different corpses to make the monster, right? So there's this scene where the monster is there's a scene where the monster is hypnotized, and it begins to speak with all the different voices of all the various body parts, like the souls of all these people who were brought back, to life as this single monster, are all present inside. And that's where the title comes from, which is Legion, because he quotes that line from the Bible in this Frankenstein movie, I am Legion, I contain multitudes, or something like that. I can't remember the exact line, but it had this huge impact on me as a kid. So the idea was this, from day one with Coldstone was, we're going to find out this is, and it's not just Xanatos' line in episode 13 where he goes, it's alive, which seemed like a Frankenstein reference. Well, it was, of course, but the character was really supposed to be a Frankenstein monster substitute. And so I wanted to get that idea of all these souls trapped in this one body. And then it was like this discussion, because you always have this thing, like there's an episode of Tailspin where Baloo and Kit, Cloud Kicker, trade bodies, right? And to make that clear to the younger audience, you get Baloo's voice coming out of Kit's mouth and Kit's voice coming out of Baloo's mouth, right? And yet somehow none of the other characters notice that the wrong voice is coming out.
Oh, I remember that one.
Knows.
Rebecca's voice was coming out of Don Carnage.
Yeah. Okay. So there was some question at the beginning of this. It's like, okay, well, who's going to be talking? I mean, literally, are we going to have, and this discussion happened before casting, but are we going to have Desdemona's voice coming out of Coldstone's mouth when her brain is in control? I'm like, no, the voice box hasn't changed. Just which soul is controlling the body. The voice box is the same, so it's always going to be Michael Dorn. And God damn, but didn't Michael just do an amazing job?
Really did.
And I'm trying to remember, Jamie, did we ask like Cece to read the line and then have him do it, or did he just do it? I can't remember.
Yeah, no, I don't think we had the other actors, demonstrate. Here's how I would say that line, particularly because half the lines were, not half of them, but fractions of lines, like one sentence.
Well, and then the idea was that you'd start off with full sequences where one person was in control or another person was in control, and then the idea was that the switching would start happening more and more rapidly. Mm-hmm. And so by the end, it's switching like every 2 or 3 words, but that it would ramp up to that. And then finally, he'd be just on the floor going, just give me silence.
It's awesome. It's really effectively done because you don't see it at first. You don't see it coming. And then something seems off. And then it slowly seems a little more off. And then it's,
And then it's really off.
So I apologize, guys. I know we got a late start, but I've got to actually run. So you guys can keep going if you have time, but I lost track of time here, and I know we started late, but
all right, before you go, Greg, is there anything you want to plug?
Young Justice Target. I don't know when this episode is
August 12th.
dropping, but okay, so by then some version of the first 3 issues will be out, I would think. Issues 1 and will be fully out. You can buy it in print at comic book shops or on Comixology or on DC Universe Infinite electronically. Issue 2 came out today on Comixology. I'm sorry, on DC Universe Infinite. And I would think that by the time this episode drops, issue 3 will also be out as well, but I'm not 100% sure. But in any event, buy Young Justice Target. We want to save her at 16.
We do.
We'll do it right now.
Also, for Gargoyles fans, there's a nice Easter egg in issue 2.
I can't comment on that. All right.
All right, have a good night.
Soon. Love you all.
Take care.
Love you too, Greg. Okay, well, sad to say it's going to be a little bit tough to get into it without him, but we can do our best. This show mostly has a timeless feel.
Talk about it. Now we can really get into it.
Have to say, and this show normally has a very timeless quality to it, besides being set in the 90s, with the exception of maybe this episode, because this episode is so completely 90s with virtual reality, the next best thing to being there. Remember when that was a thing?
Well, when it was a new thing, virtual reality? What's that new thing? I mean, I know it's new to...
Well, and like looking at the animation and stuff still, like the way the vortex is kind of consuming the castle and stuff like that, I really feel like it's a media kind of, back then it was new and shiny, but it's like something that we see a lot of still when shows are talking about virtual reality or, alternate universes and stuff like that. So like, I don't think, like, I know Greg is like, this is really did not age well, but I think it still holds up.
I think it looks great.
No, it does, but...
Though undeniably there's some references, visual references, that were of their time.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Phones and that sort of thing. But But no, in general, it looks great. I think what Greg was talking about was there was some, or maybe I'm thinking of a different comment, but there were some facial expressions where, like Elise looks beautiful, then she turns her head, and I'm like, oh, what happened?
That's unfortunate. Oh.
She's a shapeshifter, kind of. But I think it's a great episode, and Michael Dorn's a tour de force. I started to say before, it's funny because Michael was cast as someone like Keith, but made of stone more, and Michael Coldstone was not cast to be a facile character. He was cast as a very, it's made of stone. That's it. There's not a lot of, and then he does this episode. Again, he's Faye Dunaway. He's all over the place, and he was great. Yeah. He killed it.
This show is just blessed with amazing voice actors.
Mm-hmm.
It is true, and they bring it too. It's great performances in here.
Golden Cup just amuses me because we all grew up with Highlander, the big final fight at Silver Cup Studios. That's not really a question, just a comment. I love seeing that, and I've always and then when we see the inside, I wish Greg were here to elaborate on that. We'll talk to him about that next time we see Golden Cup, because it pops up a few times throughout the series, but
like a Holy Grail reference.
Yeah, I was wondering, especially considering what we learn about that later in the canon, and I guess for fans out there who are listening, maybe you can ponder this as well and let us know what you think. Do we think that may have some Illuminati influence there?
Yeah.
On Greg's behalf, I'm going to say absolutely. He had that planned from before the first script was ever written.
Of course,
you got his back. Everything was planned. Love it.
He didn't know.
Unfortunately, guys, I'm going to have to cut it close too because I've got a sick roommate. So I'm
best wishes to your roommate.
Sorry.
Best wishes to your roommate. Jamie and I will wrap things up shortly then.
All right, you guys stay out of trouble.
We'll try.
She says expecting you definitely not to stay out of trouble. All right. Take care, everyone.
I think I missed a good punchline. All right, stay healthy, be happy. Bye.
All right.
Bye.
I wasn't saying before that it doesn't hold up. I just think it's a little bit more dated than other episodes are, but it's still really good. There's not a single bad episode of Gargoyles. Even the worst episode of the series, at least in the first 2 seasons, that was pretty good, which is a track record most shows can only dream of getting.
Yeah, but there is, like you said, a timeless quality about the stories, the richness of them, and all the Shakespearean ties and everything, all that helps with the timelessness. And they tried to be really careful about contemporary cultural references, but, flat screen TVs and cell phones can only use so much imagination.
Yeah.
Let's not make this look too dated, 20 years from now. Good luck.
And while we were here, I suppose we can talk about other actors you cast for upcoming episodes in the short term. I mean, later on we get Brent Spiner. I'm sure we're going to talk about that with Greg. And then we get Darren McGavin.
There you go. And Greg was a huge Night Stalker fan. Which you guys your listeners can ask your grandparents about the Night Stalker. It's a television show back in the 70s. And he was fantastic. But he's another actor with just an amazing career. Probably more of your audience might know him from The Natural, maybe, but even that was from, I guess that was the 90s, 80s. Anyway, fantastic actor. Great old school guy. I remember we had talked about Darren and Carl Malden. Not at the time of that episode, but in the early days. Those were a couple of the actors that we talked about wanting to try to use at some point. And Greg got his Darren McGavin. He's awesome.
And he was great. It was only a one-episode role, but it was... Go on.
I'm sorry, Christmas Story. That's how everyone's going to know him, right?
yes. Wasn't he the old man?
I think he's the dad.
The old man.
Important prize.
And then after that, you bring on the late, great W. Morgan Shepherd, who as Petros Xanatos' father, who I thought was terrific. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a huge fan of his son, Mark Shepherd, because that's a very talented family altogether.
I use Morgan so many times. He's such a voice so many times in so many different projects, and people start talking about his son, and I'm like, oh, he has a kid. Like I didn't even. I knew Morgan really well, but it's funny to hear people coming at it from the direction. Hey, that's his dad.
Yeah, he's his son is a big character actor who's on a lot of TV shows, most notably Crowley from Supernatural.
I know that now. I'm saying when he started, becoming a thing, and people, that probably was with Supernatural. And people started saying, "Oh, wait." When I would hire Morgan, people would say, "Oh, wait, that's his dad." And I thought, "Wait, what? Morgan has a kid?" I didn't even. But yes, like you said, very talented family.
And he was
Morgan, just an amazing.
Yeah, and he was such a great foil to Jonathan Frakes as his as Xanatos' father, which I'm looking forward to discussing that episode in depth when we get to that. But did such a fantastic job with the cast in there. Yeah.
Well, again, Morgan's someone that used a lot. It wasn't like let's try to get he. Morgan,
yeah, I know Morgan Shepherd has done a lot of Star Trek.
Thing on Commander kind of stuff. He had such an amazing. I can't do it.
Yeah.
He had this great, just the gravel texture with his polished. He was fantastic. Narrators for bad guys were just an awesome voice. Like Tony J. Tony J was in that category.
The late, great Tony J. What a fantastic voice actor as well. He was one of my favorites growing up.
Yeah, and I would say he's a fantastic actor.
I've heard a lot of
voice acting.
I've heard a lot of stories about the voice industry at times, how SAG changed the rules at one point. Apparently there's a famous story that because of the late great Wally Burr, who was a great voice director in the 80s, Transformers, G.I. Joe, etc., among other shows, but because of him, apparently it was SAG who got involved and changed the rules that sessions cannot go beyond 4 hours. I've heard the story at conventions.
Yeah, it was limiting the session to 4 hours, and you could do 2 voices for the same price, and the third voice was an extra 10% bump. And if you want to do a 4th voice, it's another payment. Because, these guys were being brought in and, doing... started with Mel, but doing 10, 15 voices in the same episode, getting paid once. So, yeah, they corrected that with the SAG strike. I don't know what year. 80s, late 80s maybe. But long time overdue at the time.
Oh, yeah, definitely. These... Yeah,
they're just fantastic actors. I remember the very first day in animation, I was at a Hanna-Barbera Smurfs session, and Jonathan Winters was chatting with me, and he said, in that room, pointing at the studio, in that room right now, pound for pound, greatest character actors, more talent in that little booth right now than any stage in Hollywood. And he's right. These guys, especially in a show like Gargoyles, doing multiple voices and something, it's really legit acting. And then, obviously, all the other animation too, and comedy and stuff. But it's amazing what these guys do.
Yeah, you've worked with a lot of talent over the years. I was looking at some of the other shows you've voice directed over time, especially at Disney. I mean, James Woods, Wayne Knight, a lot of really fantastic
those guys are both. James was Hades in the Hercules series, which I've been told is noted as the largest single-season cast, something like that. It's like over 120 celebrity guest stars. Because that was sort of the thing. In each episode, whatever Greek god came in, like the Greek god of whatever. Oh, let's get Reba McEntire to do that.
A lot of sitcom actors.
It was Jennifer Aniston. Say again?
That's a lot of sitcom actors in that one.
Yeah, well, a lot of sitcom actors all over the place. But yeah, in that one, Tate Donovan was Hercules, and he was dating Jennifer Aniston at the time. So pretty much the whole cast of Friends came in, but also like Jon Favreau and Spawn and Jon Favreau. It was just a parade. I remember we had a big final season ensemble where they did a huge press thing. And, there were like 20 actors in the episode in this huge arc in a great big studio. And just looking around, there were like, 4 Oscar winners or nominees. And it was just it was a crazy kind of Mount Rushmore parade of celebrity faces. And back in the days when we would do ensembles with 15, 16, 18 actors, don't do that much anymore.
Nice. Well, those were all great casts. You have a gift for bringing them together. I know I've been saying this on most of the shows that we've recorded together, but I just love the work that you've done. I mean, people like you, people like Andrea Romano, people like Sue Blue, Jamie Simone, you're all unsung heroes in this industry. Which is a shame, because you should be sung. So that's one of the reasons why I'm glad that we keep bringing you on, so that we can spread the word and spread awareness of what you do. And before we do finish...
I'm happy to be here.
And before we do finish up, I was thinking, in terms of talking about Greg while he's not here, and to tie back to the beginning, I heard a story once about Greg having to stand in for an unavailable Tim Curry.
No, Tim Curry, his role in Young Justice was not as overtly evil as a lot of the guys. He was a blowhard TV guy. Sensational, sort of infotainment, pseudo-journalism kind of guy. Yeah, big blowhard pundit. Give me Greg Weisman. He was great. He was great. Sometimes, someone like Greg might have to scratch in the dialogue for whatever, Laura's son Giacomo or something. Can't get someone in and then you animate to it, then they got to come back, replace it in ADR. But Greg is also, has done some legit characters where he wasn't just standing in, where he's, the actual character in a few different series.
Mm-hmm.
He's good. That was the stuff. There was a time when Greg, for example, he was reading in for Tim Curry, and Tim has this way I mentioned earlier of really rolling words around and no, I think not. I can't do it. I'm terrible. Edit that out. But the point is, he can, he has a particular kind of speech pattern, depending on the character that he's doing. And Greg is a little tighter in his speech. So Greg's natural read on something might be, whatever. So then I said, and stay out. But Tim would be doing it, it would probably take twice as long. So Greg might do a line in 3 seconds that, for Tim, it might take 6 seconds. So since it was going to be animated, Tim was going to have to do that, match that timing. Yeah. We had to ask Greg to ease off the throttle. Sing it slower. And then do another one. Okay, now slow it down even more. And now really, I think at one point I might have said, pretend you're moving in slow motion. And to him, that's what it felt like. Just like very awkward, sort of, I'm speaking slowly. But I would love to be able to find that line and have you play it so you can hear. Because when Tim does it, that's the pace that Tim speaks. So Tim replaces it in ADR after it's animated, and it sounds fantastic. But, I'm not saying I enjoyed making Greg do it again and again, slower and slower. But I'm not saying that.
That is awesome. And Jamie, I do want to thank you for coming on. Are there any projects you want to plug?
I'm working on 12 different movies. Go see them all when they come out.
Gladly. So I want to thank our listeners for listening to the show. Please join us next time when we discuss the episode A Lighthouse in the Sea of Time.
Throbbing. I will have your head. I will not fight you, my leader. I will destroy you. You're all I have left. You are a fool. Help me, brother. No. Leave me alone, all of you. Get out of my head. Silence!